Hey everyone, welcome to our Keeping Up with Modern Classrooms episode for January 2023. My name is Sarah Moon, she, her pronouns, and I am a K-5 ELA specialist here in Durham, North Carolina.
I'm Tavia. I teach high school science in Reedsville, North Carolina.
And I am Monte. I live in Washington, D.C. I teach 6th and 8th grade science, and we are so excited to have you join us for our first episode of 2023. Happy New Year, everybody. In this episode, we're going to be talking about goal setting and helping learners set and achieve goals.
All right, so let's kind of talk about goal setting and why we do it in the first place. Goal setting can be a very important part of learning and a very good important part of the process of learning for all of our learners. One way that goal setting is kind of important or a good idea is because it personalizes the learning process for learners. Learners have the opportunity to kind of personalize their experience and base how they learn based off their own personal needs and what they want to achieve for themselves. It allows them to create intention and motivation that can help empower them, and it puts the learning back in their hands, and it establishes accountability and helps shapes responsibility to learners. It provides a foundation for learners to advocate for their own needs. And it also is a great conversation piece when you're conversing with students when they have the ability to set their own goals. So let's talk a little bit about goal setting within a modern classroom. So goal setting within a modern classroom can take all kinds of forms. You can do it through conferences. You could do it through reflection and setting goals before or after mastery checks. Another big one would be during do nows. We can set goals as a whole class even. What do we want to achieve as a group? Everything doesn't always have to be so individual.
And one of the most common ways that we see goal setting within a modern classroom is with a do now opening structure. And so for those that are unfamiliar with do nows are essentially an opening structure where students kind of check in. They can do an internal check-in and a social emotional learning check-in. They can set their goal. They can think about what their next step is. It kind of replaces quote unquote bell work, although a lot of teachers do implement some common bell work procedures like a review question or something as part of their do now. We've had some wonderful do now shared from our Facebook community. This one is from Claire. Thank you so much, Claire, for sharing this one. You can see that she has one that's like a per day one, and they kind of do an internal check-in. They let her know what they're working on, what their objective and what their goal is for the day. She also has one that is for the week. And so students are working on this do now throughout the week. And you can see down here that there's also an exit time, so they set their objective. Did they meet the objective? So really checking in with that goal setting. This one is from Amy. You can see it's very similar. I love how Amy, thank you again for sharing this. She switches up her internal checks based on, I guess, just whatever she's thinking of. So this one is an internal food check. I don't know what a Dutch Bros drink is, but Amy, I definitely want to find out. So that way I know if that's how I am internally. But I've seen she's done some character ones, she's done some book ones. It's lots of fun, and it kind of just keeps it fresh, right? This is one that I myself used. You can see that with this one, since I did it in a multi-subject classroom, that they went ahead and put their pace in all, or they put their pacing in terms of all of our subjects. We were also a zones of regulation school. And then they had their goal for today, right? And one of the best things about this do now is my students would complete it and they put it on their desk and it's there the entire day. I would go around real quick, do a quick little check. Okay, seeing if there's anything that they wanted me to know, if anybody was in the red zone or any questions about the goal. But then throughout the day, I could reference that goal with them, right? All right, friend, you said that your goal was to complete 4 lessons. Are we working towards that goal? So really having it visual and really put into words, whether that be written or verbal, can be really helpful for students.
And yeah, I really love those examples that we've gotten so far. Like even whole class goal setting, I've definitely done before a test. It's really fun to be like, all right, guys, so what's our average percentage going to be? And they'll speculate on like, oh, our average, because we're so great, is going to be like 92.5%. It's a very specific number, but it's a number. And then we take the test and I give them a class average. And sometimes they hit it and sometimes they don't, but it's always a really fun conversation topic of like, all right, where do we fall short? You know, how can we hold each other accountable? Because I always want students to help each other review and all that other stuff. And it's a really fun thing. And typically whenever they do meet the goal, I bring them some sort of treat. So whole class goal setting can also be really fun. Way of being collaborative in your class as a whole. Anyway, let's talk about some commonly asked questions from our Facebook group, which if you're not a part of that, join that. Up first, we have, how do your learners set goals? And I guess I'll start us off with this one since I am the one speaking right now. But in terms of my own specific classroom, we typically do set goals as a whole group, mostly where we do kind of what I've already mentioned. And then occasionally, and I need to get better at this, I will have them set individual goals more so as we're approaching like the end of the semester or we're doing a reflection on like where we are in the semester. I'll have them kind of do some goal setting on where they are, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm not good at this, if I'm being completely honest.
It's totally okay, Monte, because I started off strong, but as the semester has wandered on, I've kind of waned off of it just with the chaos of life. And that's okay. Because what it did do though, from us doing it so early on, the kids do it intrinsically without me having to tell them. So now they'll come in, and I do the do now by the week, like the one in the example. I give it to them for a whole week. They have access to it. It's in their folder that's already at their seat when they walk in. So they come in and their do now sheet is for Miss Clementine. Where is the do now sheet? And I haven't even told them to do it. So it kind of helps me stay on the ball, them staying on the ball. So, but I do a lot of the more individual goals because of how different my classes are. Trying to set whole goals was a real challenge. Um, so we focus on the individual because that's where I found the most work needed to be.
Very similarly to both of you, I do some whole class goals, but I do it, I guess, a little bit differently than you, Monty, because my learners and myself, we don't think about our overall class average. We think about what percent of us is proficient. So we're standards-based grading, so that's often 3, but that's what we'll do. You know, okay, how many of us are going to be proficient? Okay, we want to shoot for 70%. We want to shoot for 80%. And I found that that kind of helps think of it more as a whole class. I always tell this story because now that I'm one of our specialists, this is what we do for all of the classes, for all of the teachers that I support. Each monthly assessment, they go ahead and set their goal and they move towards it. And we think about how many greens, which are proficient, yellow, almost there, and red, not quite there yet. They have. And I always tell the story. There was one 4th grader last year, we'll call her T, and she was like super into her class meeting her goal, which was great. I was super glad for the support. And in like March or April, one of those months. So let's say March. In March, her class was 92% proficient, which is awesome. That's so great on a benchmark. The next month, she was 87%, which meant that one kid dropped right from green to yellow. And T came up to me and literally like grabbed my badge and was like, I want their name. Who got to yellow? I was like, whoa, T, whoa. Like, I'm really glad that you're focused on the goal, but like, we're not going to go after anybody. It's okay. But like Tavia mentioned, I think once you kind of put that as part of your culture, learners will really get into that. Also, when I work with my adult learners, our goals are more reflective. You know, okay, maybe we're doing a learning series on guided reading. What's a personal goal for yourself? How do you want to improve? So I think goals can really take a variety of forms, right? Maybe it's on their work task completion for the day. Maybe it's on proficiency. Maybe it's on what they want to get out of it. I think there's a lot of room for it, and it can be great to kind of play around with your learners with that to see what best interests them. Right, I think we did a great job with that first one. I'll go ahead and start us off with the second one, which what is a sustainable way that I can track my students' progress towards their goal? I teach multiple preps. When I first started with modern classrooms, I did all 4 elementary subjects in modern classrooms method because I absolutely loved it. And my students did too. But I definitely get how do we make this sustainable? The 2 ways that I did is one, when I did the whole class goal, we graph it. And so I just have like a big chart paper that we have the bar graph on. As soon as we finish, we chart the bar graph and we move on with our lives. And it's just kind of there always as a reference. The other one, like I said, with my Do Now, the kiddos would write their goal, and then it's on their desk that entire day. And so it's just right there every time I walk around, every time I check in. Hey, Monte, you said your goal was to use technology sustainably. Right now you're on your phone. Are you meeting your goal, right? Or, hey, Monte, you said that your goal is to complete 3 lessons. I saw that you're 2 of the way there. Like, awesome job. I think making the goals really visible can be really helpful to both the educator and the learner because there's less to think about. Monte, what is your thoughts about keeping it sustainable?
My biggest piece of advice for keeping it sustainable is put most of the work on the child, if I'm being completely honest. Like, I myself am not really doing a lot. Like, if we are setting a goal or, they're working towards a certain thing, I have the kids like do that themselves. Like, for example, and I've talked about this in other episodes, but every lesson my kids get a signature sheet. And so if it's like we need to have X amount of tasks done by the end of class, they're able to really look at their signature sheet and be like, man, I fell short, or man, I hit the goal. In addition to that, just like overall, because we are also a standards-based school, all the kids have a skill book. And so if there's like, say, we're looking at their proficiency over time of like mastery checks and like content, is just in their skill book. And again, it's like super easy for me to pull information from formative, which I use to give mastery checks, and then just throw it in their skill book. And the skill book just allows them to be able to see all of their, benchmarks over time. And again, it's a very low stakes thing that I have to do anyway, because where their grades go. But I just pull it straight from formative. So I would say any automated way you can do it, or any way that you can really put it on the child to be responsible for keeping track of what they've achieved. It makes your life a little bit easier, and it puts some control in their hands to like really think about it when you are putting it on them.
I totally agree with both of you. This is kind of where I fell short a little bit. It's kind of tracking, and I'm trying to find the best way to help keep track. We've tried a few things where they keep a hold of their Do Now with their goal on it for us to refer back to. I kind of do the same thing Sarah does, where you kind of walk around and look at it and we talk about it. But that's probably about as far as I have gotten so far. And again, I deal with high schoolers, so it's a little bit different. They don't want, no, you're not gonna put my business up and for everybody to see. It's nobody's business what my goal is. That attitudinal bunch. So doing it kind of publicly is kind of out of not what's gonna happen, but they do like to talk about it with their close friends, and their friends will get on them and they hold each other accountable. You said that you was not going to be on your phone today, and you've been on your phone 3 times. And they try to do it loud enough so I hear it, so I'll say something, but usually they'll go ahead and put it up, and it usually comes with, you always tell everything. So I kind of make it their thing. It's their learning goal. And they have to kind of learn how to be a little more self-sufficient because they're getting ready to go out in the world, and nobody's going to hold their hand about the goals they want in life. So I really have a big emphasis on they are the ones in control of tracking their own progress, and I'm just kind of there to help facilitate that process, not kind of guide it.
I think goal setting is yet another really soft skill, I guess we would say, that the modern classrooms method really helps students with. Tavia, you want to go ahead and start us for our last question, which is, some of my learners are having trouble meeting the deadline for summative assessments. How do you handle this?
So from my perspective, because again, I do teach high school, sometimes it's got to be a hard fall. So with my kids, the deadline is set. They know that it is set from the very first day that the unit begins. And when the day of the test comes, the day of the test comes. Yes, there are exceptions made for the chronically absent student, but we also have an additional period where I work with that student one-on-one if need be to help get them caught up, unless they've been out for like 20 days or something. But that's also another part of the classroom where we're doing small groups so kids don't fall too far behind. So the first time they think it's a game, test comes, or she'll just move it because we're not there yet. I stick to my deadlines. I let them stumble. because with every test or assessment they take, they have the opportunity to retake it and reassess. So they have to go back and make sure their assignments are complete, and then I allow them to reassess on the test. So I make them take it, especially if you are the student who has been there every day. You're gonna take the test because you need to learn that deadlines mean something. But again, I teach high school, so it makes a difference.
Well, and I think in terms of goal setting, I think a lot of times this happens, and like you were kind of alluding to, Tavia, a lot of times, sometimes it happens more at the beginning of a course than towards the middle. But I think it's because learners have trouble at first setting reasonable goals for themselves, right? I typically tell the story of there was one baby who was behind pace for a variety of reasons, and he came in and he was like ready to have a great day. He was like, I'm going to complete 20 lessons today. And I was like, love the attitude. You're not going to. Like, it's just like, it's not a reasonable goal. And I think sometimes when students start to be able to have more control over their learning, they have to have that explicit teaching of what is a reasonable goal to set for myself, right? How can I know myself as a learner? What can I accomplish in this amount of time? And how can I do that? So I think a lot of conversations have to take place. And like Tavia and I both do, and I know Monte has the signature sheet too, right? But having those conversational moments where you're able to talk to the learners about, okay, what was this goal? Was it a reasonable goal? How are we working towards that goal? So that way they're really able to pace themselves to a deadline versus thinking A, that they have all the time in the world and they don't have to do it right now, or B, oh, I'll just do that later. What about you, Monte?
Mid-unit deadlines are your friend. I feel like I have never actually experienced a situation in which a kid reaches the point of the summative assessment and they're just not ready, because every lesson has a due date and it's a hard due date. And in my class, students know that when we get to the end of the lesson, you need to be done with the lesson. And if you're not done with the lesson, it is now homework. And I don't typically give homework outside of like summative assessments. And so they know, okay, they need to do it, because if they come back the future class, then now we start looping in parents. And nothing worse to an 8th grader is when you email their parents to tell their parents that they didn't do their homework. So, it only happens once or twice for me. But like, I would say if you're finding that your students are struggling with the freedom of just an end of unit deadline, give them some other individual deadlines and be really like hard on it. If you're saying like lessons 1 and 2 are due on this date, it needs to be done, and then figure out some sort of natural consequence for it not being done, whether that's you email their parents to say like, well, they're behind, or you make the kids come to like mandatory tutoring or whatever it may be. But sometimes you're not going to be the child's favorite person and they'll get over it, but at the end of the day they won't be behind. And so that's just really how I've always handled it. Everything has a very strict deadline, so that by the time we reach the end of the last lesson and we're moving into the summative assessment, outside of those that are absent a lot, which is so funny because I work in a private school and didn't think it would be a thing, but they go on vacations all the time. So, we do sometimes run into that, and that's like Tavia said, like extreme circumstances, but like outside of that, it's not much of an issue. So
Well, and I think, Monte, thank you so much for sharing that, because that's just a great example of scaffolding the whole idea of goal setting, right? And even we as adults, like, I know I just finished grad school and I knew that I had final papers due in December, and one of them was like 50 pages long, but I didn't wait till 2 days before to do it, right? Like, I had to set myself these little mini deadlines, right? And so I think sometimes shortening the window of time can be a great way for students and for learners to kind of learn what they can do within moments of time, so that way when they're grown and changing the world for the better, they have that skill. All right, Monte, you
I'm
want to
just
go
going on
ahead?
record to say that I probably would have waited until 2 days before. I'm not gonna lie. That's the procrastinator here. I know I'm talking about, and that's why I'm very strict in my deadlines, because I know that I am a procrastinator, and if someone gave me a lot of freedom, I would never get it. Anyway, as always, check the show notes of today's show to be able to see some resources, including a podcast episode and an article. And next month, please make sure you join us. We will be talking about improving outcomes for learners with learning differences.
And as Monte mentioned before, if you are not a part of our Facebook group, please join. We have a fabulous community that is very supportive and is always willing to be a thought partner. Definitely follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn as well. All of those are at Modern Class Proj, and we look forward to seeing you online.
And remember, you can always join us on Twitter on the first Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. at Modern Class Proj. We have some great conversations, and we get together with educators all over the world, whether you're a part of a modern classroom or not. And that's the first Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m.
All right, everyone. Happy New Year. And we look forward to a full year of Keeping Up with Modern Classroom episodes. We'll see y'all later.